So one passage where I think people get it so fundamentally wrong. Now, I could make a systematic theology argument for why they get it wrong, but I think an even stronger argument for why they get it wrong is the historic, sort of like critical way, which is render unto Caesar. People
Yeah.
get that passage so fundamentally wrong, because, well, partly because they don't read the text. Because if Jesus was saying, pay your taxes, the Pharisees would not have responded with like awe and wonder at his amazing answer. They would have been like so glad that he discredited himself to so many of his Jewish followers by just like affirming the Roman tax collection system, which, by the way, little caveat, I'm still fuming about how The Chosen got this wrong. I love The Chosen show, and they've done so many things right, but man, they dropped the ball on that, because like they not only did they drop the ball by Jesus having like affirming like we literally Jesus saying we pay taxes so we can have roads. I mean, I literally just started yelling in my living room as I'm watching this, because I'm just like, oh my god, no.
Oh, so they
But
actually said that on The Chosen, that we pay taxes. Is that
they
was what
had
they said?
Jesus go, we pay taxes so that the government provides us things like roads and infrastructure. And I was just like,
Dude, I
why?
hope that was
Like,
a
I
joke.
love.
Wouldn't that be funny if the creators of that show were libertarians and they were just trolling everyone?
Oh, I hope
Probably not,
it'd
but
be probably not, but it's. I mean, it'd be a very good troll.
yeah, it would be.
But they also got it wrong, because the Pharisees then are happy with his answer, because they're like, oh, cool, because like they have some of the Jews getting angry, and they're like, ah, yes, we're making some people against him. I'm like, well, you can't get that from the text at all, because that is not what it says. But beyond that, if you just don't understand like the like why tax collectors were hated, why the Roman occupation and tax system was so corrupt and awful and whatnot, like, and why they asked that question in the first place. If you don't understand why that question was a trap, you're going to get your reading of that passage just so backwards and wrong. So the historic approach is, I think, fundamental there. Now, another passage that comes to mind, um, well, that came to mind and now it's escaped my mind. We're doing this live, people, so bear with me here. My brain just did a complete uh mind wipe here. While I'm thinking of it, you respond to the render unto Caesar. It'll come back to me then.
Yeah, and this is again where I think that these historical considerations are extremely important. We can't read that passage in isolation and then jump into a conclusion about what it means. So I just, I've been writing this book for the last 7 months or so, and I just finished up like the Passion narratives in the Gospels in the final week of Jesus's life. So I've spent a lot of time working on this passage lately, and a couple of very serious historical questions that people do not take into consideration when they look at the render unto Caesar passage has to do with the way that the synoptic evangelists, so this is Matthew, Mark, and Luke, are playing with their sources. So like you have to account for the synoptic problem, which is the literary relationship between those three gospels. There are differences between all three of them, but they're obviously very similar. And so at least one of them had to be borrowing from the other two, right? So the solution to the synoptic problem that I hold to is called the Farrer theory. I believe that Mark wrote first, and then Matthew used Mark as a source, supplemented his own material, and that Luke was working with both Matthew and Mark. And there's been kind of a renaissance of the Farrer theory lately. And so I would say that biblical scholarship is kind of split between that and then the two source theory, which is that Mark was written first. Matthew and Luke both knew Mark, but Matthew and Luke have a lot of material in common that's not in Mark. And it's a lot of like sayings of Jesus. So the two source theory is that there's another source that we don't have that was just a compilation of sayings that Matthew and Luke used as a source. But again, like if you're gonna figure out, like, so with this passage render unto Caesar, it's in all three gospels, and it's in a very long string of triple tradition, meaning that all three gospels include the same traditions in the same order for an extended period of time. Like now Matthew has a couple of parables thrown in there, but he basically retains the same order, and it starts with the triumphal entry and it ends with Jesus talking about how the temple is going to be destroyed. And it's a very long string of triple tradition, one of the longest in the gospels. And the entire point of that larger string of triple tradition is to show that Jesus is a Messiah and that he has true authority, while the Jerusalem elite and the Herodians do not. So anything we say about like that, the render unto Caesar passage has to account for those like synoptic variations and for the fact that it's included in this wider tradition that is obviously designed to make a point that's not about the nature of government. And then within that passage, you have to take into consideration questions like, well, how did the like ancient Romans think about about coinage and taxation. And there was a very prevalent theory in the ancient Roman world that coinage belonged to the emperor, that like the coin, since it had the emperor's image, it was literally his property. And what's interesting about the question that's posed to Jesus by the Herodians and the Pharisees is that they twice ask him, should you pay your taxes to Caesar? And then when Jesus says, render unto Caesar the things that are Caesar, he uses a different Greek word than the word pay. And the word that Jesus uses there is a word that kind of signals obligation. And the point that he's trying to make is, well, this coin kind of belongs to Caesar, and so we should go ahead and give it back to him. And then when he says, render unto God the things that are God, he's making that point and directing it at the Pharisees and saying, well, you guys aren't really doing that. And the reason why they're not really doing that is that they're in the temple precinct and they have a blasphemous coin with the image of an emperor at hand that they could show them. So there's all of these kind of historical and kind of literary variables at play here, that when people just quote that passage in the abstract, they don't account for any of that. And so they wind up coming to wrong conclusions that somehow Jesus is justifying never-ending wars in the Federal Reserve and all the stuff that comes with modern authoritarian socialism, right? And we just can't do that. And so trying to understand that passage in its historical and literary context, taking into consideration its position in the synoptic tradition, all of those things have to at least be accounted for before we can say with any sort of confidence that we like have a working theory about what's going on there. This is like a